Hey there. Welcome to Tips and Techniques for Actors, Authors, and Storytellers. My guest tonight is Scott Williams, who's a wonderful writer, and we'll go through his credits in a moment, but I just want to remind everybody watching to please subscribe to this channel to get notifications of all the upcoming live streams. Make sure that you click the bell icon. So, as I said, my guest tonight, Scott Williams, wonderful television writer, screenwriter, worked on NYPD Blue, Brooklyn South, Third Watch, Crossing Jordan, Bones, Castle, and now NCIS. And he's also a wonderful guy, friend of mine for a while, with a lot of very useful information to share. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Matthew. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing pretty good.
Well, I subscribe to your page. Hold on, your channel.
Oh, okay.
Right there. Get right to that bit of business out of the way.
Oh, okay. Yes, very important to subscribe to the page. And while you're doing that,
how are you?
Will remind people. I'm doing good. I have been in quarantine this is my 14th day. Tomorrow morning, I am going to get up and get out on my bicycle.
You actually get to see people.
I get to see people. I've been here with my mom for 2 weeks. We have not hugged.
So first hug your mom, then go for the bike ride.
Yes. I will hug my mom. I'll thank her for feeding me for the past 2 weeks. I've been on an interesting diet. We worked out pancakes for breakfast, pizza for lunch, and flounder for dinner because she could just slide it all right under the door. It worked out.
All skinny food. That's good.
Yeah, it worked out fine. So you started out as an actor.
I did. I got out of college and did no acting in college, but it was always sort of a dream of mine. I'd actually gone to school to be a coach. I was a phys ed major at SUNY Cortland, and thought, oh, you do what you know. And at that time, all I knew was I wanted to coach sports, and then promptly flunked out because I failed all the sciences in that first semester of freshman year. And it was the good graces of the dean at the time when I went back up and appealed and said, well, wow, geez, 2 Ds, an F, and an A. Well, you got an A in freshman English. Why don't you be an English major? So I ran out in the parking lot to my dad, like, Dad, I got to be an English major. Like they let me back in, and he was very relieved. And then he was an Air Force man. He was like, what can you do with an English major? And I was like, well, the dean says I could go to law school if I wanted to. And he says, you couldn't be a gym teacher. How are you going to be a lawyer? I don't understand. But so I got through by the skin of my teeth as an English major, but the burning desire in the back of my head throughout college was bartending, was acting. Growing up on The Honeymooners and Art Carney and him making me laugh, I wanted to be that guy. And then Planet of the Apes and Charlton Heston, I wanted to be that guy too. So I thought, well, before I'm 30, so there's nothing I regret. Let me just graduate, go to New York, and try to become an actor. And again, from my college and the experience that I'd had, I might as well have said astronaut. But and it was a professor that had actually failed me that freshman year, who came into my bar my senior year and said, so Scott, what's your plan? And again, I had said actor many times and been kind of mocked. And this one professor was the only one. I said, well, I'm going to go to New York and be an actor. And he said, I could see that. Now, I don't know if that was a good or bad thing, but he said, and then he watched me bartend, and he said, and by the way, this profession will serve you well down there in New York. And I in my head thought, fuck you, buddy. I'm going to be a big movie star within a year. Right. Wait till they get a load of me, Right. Or every young actor thinks or young anybody going into the big city thinks. And then I got into New York, and of course promptly needed a bar job immediately. And that began my 12-year bartending career as I took classes, did plays, did some TV guest spots, did lots of commercials, that sort of thing, but never not tending bar to make ends meet. But I enrolled with a mutual friend of ours, Greg Zittel, and who had been at the neighborhood playhouse, and he was my acting teacher. And that kind of began the journey. So I had some success, and then as they say, as I said in my early 20s, well, by the time I turned 30, I don't want to regret not trying this. As I approached 30, some buddies of mine and I that I'd done a play with, and my girlfriend at the time were all like, let's go to LA. And I was like, you know, if I'm ever going to try it, I got to get serious. I got to go try LA. But I told all my New York friends, because it's all I knew. I grew up in Yonkers, New York. You know, I'm not staying in LA. I'm going to do pilot season, 3-4 months, then I'm back. Don't worry about it. I'll never become a Californian. And, you know, it's a tale as old as time. I came to LA and never came back.
Right.
You know, I go back to New York as often as I can. I married a Brooklyn girl, you know, so my roots are definitely there. But yeah, so and then through acting, I started a theater company with a buddy of mine to get sort of discovered, and in LA, and I just I started writing one-act plays for that theater company, and it was sort of out of desperation. We used to tell our actors, like, okay, everybody give us $100 each, and we'll book a theater, and you know, it'll be like throwing our hats over the wall, like, hey kids, let's put on a show. And even though I was a bartender, I was bartending at this point in Santa Monica at a place called Harvelle's. Do you know Harvelle's in Santa Monica? I
only drink alone at home.
But yeah, about 6 actors came to me. They had chosen they said, we don't like the play we chose. We don't like each other. We want our money back. And even though I probably had it in my sock drawer for my bartending money, I was like, just give me one night. Let me try something. And I pulled out this old IBM Selectra. Remember the typewriter ball? Yeah. And I pulled that out and plunked out what amounted to like an SNL sketch for like 6 people. And I'd never written a script before, but I always describe it as, for the first time, I felt like the applause came from within. Like suddenly, like I was digging this and I didn't care what anybody else thought, which is a feeling that I hadn't really experienced all that often as an actor. I kind of needed the feedback first, and then I was like, oh, I guess that was okay. So, right. And as you know, as an actor, that's not a good thing. So, I decided right there, and of course, then they read it and liked it, and then we put it up, and the audience responded, and that was like heroin in the veins. So I then just dedicated the next, like, you know, like all of my early 30s to writing all day and bartending all night for about 3 or 4 years, taking every screenwriting class in the book and all that stuff. So. And
cut to, you're writing for Ron Howard and Kevin Costner and Ray Liotta. How does that happen?
Yeah, that's a story. I had been turned down in writing scripts. I'd write one, I'd finish one, I'd put it in yellow envelopes, and I'd go and I'd mail them all to agencies, and I'd get rejections, and I was getting rejected for a solid 3 years with everything I wrote. By the time I had a stack of 6 scripts on my desk over a course of 3 years, they were all, I was getting rejection letters left and right. And then one night in my bar at Harvelle's, excuse me, a regular customer, Vinny, came in with Sean Penn, and I had a script based on a true story of an actual murder that a friend of mine had witnessed in New York, kind of a bartending script, that he'd be perfect for, and he still would be. And so I just chatted up Sean and him for a little while, and then Sean left, and then I'd grab Vinny by the collar and like, you got to hook a brother up. Like, you know, he can rewrite it, he can direct it, he can star in it. I don't care what he does. I just need a break. I need to, you know. And Vinny was like, fine, give me the script. Gave him the script, and a few days later, a woman came in who said, you know, I work for Sean's company, and you know, he doesn't read stuff, he's busy, but I really liked your script. You need an agent. So I actually got my agent from behind the bar, and then that agent sent the script around. I got a bunch of meetings off that script, and one of which was with Ray Liotta's management company, Addis Wexler, Keith Addis and Nick Wexler. Great guys. Great, because they gave me my start. And also, right. And they said, you should write for Ray Liotta. And this was about 3 or 4 years after Goodfellas. And I was like, yes, I should. You know,
I should be doing that.
I should be writing for Ray. So actually, there's a Greg Zittel story I can tell you to that if you'd like.
Sure.
Did you know Greg personally?
I met him through my ex-wife several times.
Okay, yes, through Pamela.
And I did a couple of readings and workshops that he was involved in, but I never studied with him.
I went back to New York, so so they give me a New Yorker article that Ray likes, and I turn it into a pitch for a movie, and he buys it. And my new agent, who's all of maybe 24 at the time, calls me up and says, okay, they came in at $25,000. And I'm like, yes, okay, I'll write. Yes, are you kidding? Yes, I'll write that script.
Right.
He goes, hold on, I got a counter. So I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, I'm going to go back at 75. I'm like, no, I'm not worth 75. What are you doing? I don't. So he calls me back a little while later. He goes, okay, we close at 55. Now my head's exploding.
Right.
But it started a little clock in my head of like, I had just left my bartending job at this moment, you know, and and 12 years of bartending at that, and lots of rejection. So I'm like, I'm not worth $55,000. So I go to New York and I go on a bunch of ride-alongs with some cop buddies of mine. And along the way, I stopped by Greg's acting class, of whom I know a few of the students that I've been in class with and stuff. And I tell Greg this story. And Greg, and is so lovely, he hears me out, and I'm like, yeah, and they're going to pay me $55,000, and how the hell am I going to earn that? Like, if I blow this chance, I go back to bartending, and it's over for me. Like, this is the biggest chance, and what if I blow it? And he just kind of nodded and went, yeah, I see where that would be a problem. And then he got a moment, you know, when you're coaching actors, where he's giving this actor an as if. It's as if, you know, trying to explain a moment. And somehow he made it germane to whatever he was teaching the actor. But he said, you know, it's as if, let's just say you're writing a script for a movie, they're going to pay you $55,000. Now I'm sitting behind him. I'm not even looking. I'm kind of like looking around the room, and suddenly he's got my attention. And he said to the actor, he goes, let me tell you something. He goes, you're worried that you're not worth that $55,000. Again, saying it to the kid, not to me. He goes, well, let me tell you something. He goes, they're not paying you to write the script. The script you're writing for free. They're paying you for every rejection you ever got. They're paying you for every keg you ever changed, every fight you ever broke up, every 4 a.m. lockup at the middle of the night as you're bartending, every lost audition, all the dues you paid. That's what they're paying you. He said the script, it's a bargain for them. They're getting because you can do that in your sleep. And I can tell you that it really is what got me through, and it still gets me through to this day as a veteran now of 20 plus years in television. When I'm hitting my act 3 and I've painted myself into a corner and I'm like, Jesus Christ, this is the one where I get found out. This is the script where they figure out it's all smoke and mirrors. I have no idea what I'm doing. Shit, why did I start this? I thought I'm not smart enough to figure this out. That coaching from Greg Zittel still gets in, like, just breathe, just deliver what you do. You don't got to be any better or any worse. Just do what you do, because that's what they're paying you to do.
You know, what you're saying is so funny, because I was talking to a friend yesterday, and my classes just started at the university. Mm-hmm. And the first class every semester, I'm nervous. I'm not nervous after the first class, mm-hmm. but the first class I'm nervous. And she said to me, why? And I said, I think it's probably a little imposter syndrome. It's like, this is the time they're going to find me out. And she said, well, how long have you been teaching? I said, 12, 14 years. And she said, and you still feel that way? And I said, yeah. But I think I'm glad I still feel that way, because I think it's that feeling that every play, every script, every new semester makes me think, how can I do this better than I did it last time?
100%. I agree wholeheartedly. Yeah. It's not a technique even. And it really is from a genuine place. The only difference now is, I would say, I have the years under my belt where I can go, okay, you felt this way before and you've worked through it. Just keep going, whereas but it's still a very real feeling,
right?
Same as it was back then.
But you get to that place where you say, oh, this is the part of rehearsal where I think I've forgotten how to act.
I'm sure. Yeah. Yeah. And then you kind of trust the tools shed that you've built over the amount of years, or the work you've done putting into it. And you just trust the process, trust what you can do. And I've spoken to friends. I have a high school buddy who works for Hertz Rent-A-Car, and he's awesome. But I talked to him about imposter syndrome. He goes, I feel that way all the time. I always think someone's going to be better than me in the office or whatever. So no one's immune to it. And anyone that denies they have it, I think is, crazy, or an actual imposter. So
those years when you said you had a stack of 6 scripts, mm-hmm. were they pilot scripts? Were they movie scripts? Were they spec scripts?
I was solely focused on features. I just thought, I initially sent out to write my Rocky. I said, I'm going to write because I still had the acting career in mind. I'm going to write a script that I'm not going to ask myself to be Rocky. I'm going to be Rocky's best friend. I'll give myself a role in the movie, but I think I'll try to sell a movie that way. And then eventually one just took over the other, to where my then girlfriend, now wife, is, you know, I was working on a spec from home before the Ray Liotta thing had even happened, and my commercial agent called me, and you know, you get those calls, you know, we're in the Valley, and they're like, could you be at Abbot Kinney in Venice by 5? And you're like, oh shit, sit on the 405 for the next 6 hours, or keep working. And I was like really loving what I was writing, and my girlfriend, then now wife, says, you know, she goes, just tell them you don't want to go. And you know, as you know, actors never turn down an audition, or rarely. Right. And I don't know what got into me, but a little voice inside me, I called her up and I just said, you know, I don't think I'm going to make this audition. And as a matter of fact, I don't think don't bother sending me out at all anymore. I think I'm done. Because I hadn't booked in a year. Like, it had been one of those, I felt like I'd hit a dry patch in my heart. I just think wasn't in it anymore. I hadn't done any acting classes. I focused solely on the writing. So the idea of writing my Rocky was gone. So those were all feature scripts, but then the Ray Liotta script was very well received. I was very happy with that. And it became a calling card. For some reason, Ray had followed up Goodfellas with a couple of movies that didn't do so well at the box office, so it was harder to get a movie of his made. But then that script got me somehow to Ron Howard. Ron Howard had one of his executive producers, Todd Hallowell, had worked on a bunch of Ron's movies, came up with Ron really through like Parenthood in those days. And Todd, you know, Ron was like, hey, Todd, I'll produce, you direct. Let's do that. Because Todd had done a bunch of second unit stuff for him. And so Todd said, I really want to make like a 70s biker movie. You know, something akin to what's the one now, Sons of Anarchy now. But we're talking like mid 90s. And so for some reason, I was in a stack of script that he picked out. They said, well, here's a bunch of writers we like. Read these. And he picked out the Ray Liotta script, and they hired me to write a biker movie. Which again, I was like, you know, I know cops and wise guys. I don't really know bikers. And they were like, just write the movie and we'll add motorcycles, you know, don't worry about it. And that was a wonderful experience. And Ron was incredible. But again, another example of just how hard it is to get a movie made. That movie didn't get made. So there's another script where I was suddenly, you and I had spoken about this before, about writers who don't get anything produced, and yet we're able to make a living.
Yeah, I've been to the very nice homes of people, and they have no work that anybody's ever seen.
Yeah, yes. I had a nice little home. I had a very nice home, but it was paid for by movies that weren't getting made. So there's worse ways to go.
Yeah.
And then I had another script option with Kevin Costner, and he was great to work with. Again, didn't go. And then I got married, and my wife and I got pregnant right away because it was time, and we were both in our late 30s. It was like, let's go. And I think, you know, it sort of leads into, I can double back to this a little bit, but we had a child born with a disability, our son Shane. And I remember saying to my sister, who had flown in from New York, and a buddy of mine had come from up north, and I said, okay, so the best case scenario was that Shane was going to spend his life in a wheelchair. So my niece at the time, who's now grown, had said, when my sister broke the news to her that Shane may live in a wheelchair, she said, well, what's the big deal? We just build ramps everywhere. So it set me on researching, you know, all the things that we would need to do for the house. And I remember saying to my sister, my buddy Brian, I said, you know, I'm making a living right now, but I need to up the game somehow, because I'm going to have to pay for Shane's care. I'm going to have to retrofit the house with ramps and figure out all that stuff. And literally, as I said it and put it out in the universe, my agent called me maybe that afternoon or maybe the next day and just said, don't ask me how, but that Ray Liotta script is like, you know, your lucky charm. First of all, he said, I'm really sorry what you're going through, all that stuff. He got that out of the way and just said, I'm really sorry. I know this is bad timing. But that Ray Liotta script somehow got in the hands of David Milch and Stephen Bochco, and they want to know if you want to write television. And for years, friends had said to me, like, you know, films are great, but the money's in TV or whatever. Do TV, it's better for the writer. You have more control. Movies are more about the director. So it was sort of like I kind of put out in the universe that I needed to up my game, and sort of TV found me. So I was super lucky in that regard, and obviously with the best in the business with Milch and Bochco.
Right.
So that
NYPD Blue, which just, you know, kind of I'll just kind of changed the face of television. Completely changed it. And it was before sort of Hill Street Blues and then NYPD Blue are the turning points.
Pretty much, absolutely. There hadn't been cop shows like them before, and NYPD Blue is now, it's sort of like what the standard cop show looks like, but for its day, it was like totally groundbreaking. And Milch brought me in and said, you know, I'm launching a new show called Brooklyn South, but you know, I'm going to give you like an audition piece to write. I'm going to give you an episode of NYPD Blue to write. I sat down, I talked to the cop that worked there and stuff. He gave me a crime, and I, you know, pitched them the story I would write. And on the strength of the script that I'd written, they put me on the staff of Brooklyn South. So, and I've been, knock wood, been very blessed ever since. So, yeah, Milch kind of, and stupidly in that meeting, by the way, at lunch, David Milch is saying, you know, so what do you say? You want to write TV? He starts noting my Ray Liotta script. I like this. I didn't like that. I didn't like this. He actually said, you know, you're a good enough writer. I like your writing. He goes, I like the fact that you attended bar for 12 years much more. He says, he goes, you have stories to tell. You've seen people at their worst. You've seen people at their best. You know, you're not some kid out of, you know, USC, you know, screenwriting school or whatever. Like, you know, he said, you've lived a life, and I like that. Because by this time I was like 36 years old. And, but stupidly, when he said, so what do you say, kid? You want to write TV? I don't know what came over me, but I think it was just the fear and the imposter syndrome. I was like, well, you know, David, I've always been more of a feature guy. And he just stopped me, and he goes, really? When's the last time you heard action? And I was like, never.
Yeah, nice. I hear what you're saying about having a life too, though, because it's something I try to talk to my students about. You know, my years practicing law and doing other things feed everything I do as a writer, as an actor, as a director, so much more than if I had a straight path.
100%. 100%. I often tell, you know, I'll talk sometimes to writing classes or acting classes, and I'll say, man, you better have a day job. I don't care if you're making French fries at McDonald's. You may one day write the script about the French fry maker who saved the universe. You know, like you will write that script. So like whatever your job is. I remember John Boehner. Remember the guy from Congress that used to cry all the time? Remember that guy?
I try not to, but I do.
So Boehner's named House Speaker, and I remember him crying up there on the podium as he was wont to do. And he said, he goes, you know, when I think of all the crap jobs I've had along the way, and my freaking head exploded, because I was like, crap jobs? You're talking to the country. People have these crap jobs. Yeah. They're living this life. Yeah. I've had lots of crap jobs, you know.
Yeah.
And I thought, so I always tell people, like, especially people aspiring to write or act or do any of that stuff, or to do anything in life, I'm always like, there are no such thing as crap jobs. Like everything, yes, there's jobs you don't like doing. And listen, pretending bar I had a blast in my 20s. By my mid 30s, I was ready to be done with it, but I was like making money and paying my bills and doing okay. But I had also like washed dishes and dug ditches and done all the dirty work. And when I heard there's no such thing as a crap job, it's all like there's nobility in that work, and you can make it, especially for an artist, for an actor or a writer. Man, that's just material. You're just building a wealth, a file cabinet of you know, of material that you can use someday. You know, so.
Let me ask you, because I know I have a lot of students out there who are in film school right now, and screenwriters, et cetera. You know, the value, we talked about pilot scripts, film scripts, the value of writing a script for a show that's on the air, that you know, the traditional spec script that will never get produced, never get looked at by the people on the show. Mm-hmm. But you're writing that so that you need an agent, and you need to show them that you can adopt another voice. So I'm happy to say I wrote the absolute best episode of a show ever, but it will never get produced because, well, the show's off the air now. Mm-hmm. Covert Affairs. I wrote the best episode of Covert Affairs.
Cool.
But it'll never get seen. But is that an exercise that people should still be engaging in? Do agents want to see that?
You know, I'll say, because I haven't been in the market a long time, I haven't been in that market for a while.
Right.
We still read specs. we still read samples from other people's work. I often like to read original work just so I can hear that writer's voice, but it's equally important. And again, I tell new writers this all the time, is like, you have to be able to mimic the voice of the show you're on. When I
read specs of NCIS, or
yeah,
you want to see a spec on another show?
I never want to do that personally, and no one on our show does that. Years ago, when I was on Bones, Hart Hansen asked me to read a whole stack of stuff, and I didn't read any of the Boneses, to be honest, because I didn't want to like this. I just think it's dangerous to like, you get ideas from scripts, and I don't want to rip anybody off, even unintentionally.
Right.
Something in a script for NCIS, and then say, oh, that was pretty good, or it needs some work, or maybe not them, or
right.
But if there's something in there that I then, am I sitting in the room and I'm desperate for an idea, and I for a solve of a particular thing, and I think of that thing, and I don't even know where the idea came from, but it's from the thing I read 3 years ago. It's like, I don't want to risk that, and I don't want to do the writer, and I don't want to do that to myself. So, but I'll read specs of other shows that I'm familiar with.
Right.
And I'll see if they're able to match the tone, for sure, because that's very much part of the job. When I was on a show, a Third Watch, Eddie Bonero gave me a new writer's script to rewrite. And she had said to me afterwards, and I think I used a lot of her stuff too, because she was a good writer, but she came to me, she just goes, this doesn't even sound like me anymore. And I was like, well, yeah, it sounds like a Third Watch. Like, that's the job. Like, it's like get the job, get on a show, mimic the voice of the show, and don't worry about it. Your voice will definitely come through. Mark Harmon to this day says he can tear the front page off of any one of our scripts, and there's like 7 or 8 of us writers. He says, I can rip the front page off of any script, and within 5 pages I know who wrote it, just based upon his familiarity with his writers, because our voices come through. They still sound like an NCIS, but everybody has their own little flair that you kind of maybe the canniest viewer will notice on. This one's a little more dramatic than some of the others. This one's a little more comedic than some of the others. They'll be able to tell one writer from the other. But
I checked if you had written my Third Watches. You weren't the writer on either of my Third Watch episodes.
Oh, I wish I'd known you back then. No. Yeah.
I did what I always do. I told somebody that I played a doctor giving somebody bad news.
Doctor or lawyer, one of the other.
What I always do. I give people bad news. Something about this face. We did everything we could.
You are, you're just so soothing, so calming. So you've got that way about you. But I loved writing Third Watch, because I came in season 3, and it was right as 9/11 happened, my first season on, and we had done. I'd written my first script for the show. I'd written about a building collapse, oddly enough, and they were talking about, well, it's kind of a big episode. Where it was actually a building collapse where like firemen and cops get trapped. Like they were breaking up a bachelor party and the floor collapsed, and it was
wow. Yeah,
and John Wells, lovely man, just said, this is a big budget. We're going to push it a few episodes for sweeps. Because it's just very expensive. But then literally a couple of days later, 9/11 happened, and in the mix of us sitting around John's office going, do we even go on? Can we go on? We're a cop about New York City firefighters and cops and, medics. Can we even go on after this? And then, John just turned to me as an aside. He goes, on the lesser side of importance, your script is done. Like it'll never see the light of day. I'm like, yeah, I know. Well, so that was that. Right. But I really have to say it was an honor to get to tell those stories and even work with some of those firemen and cops at that time. It was a really amazing period of time in New York, very galvanizing, very I don't know, I felt very fortunate to be there as a New Yorker, to get to live in LA and then like go to New York to shoot episodes and to write about the streets I'd lived on, but especially around that time. So anyway, I digress.
I was terrified when I did that show because I just had shoulder surgery and I couldn't move my left arm. And I went to the audition. I had a sling on still at the audition. And I went to the audition and took my arm out of the sling and put my hand in my pocket and did the audition.
Okay.
And then got the job.
Yeah.
And a couple of days later, I'm shooting. I can't move my arm.
Okay.
I'm trying to get through 2 days of shooting without letting anybody know that I actually can't move my left arm.
So nobody better hand you a second clipboard. You're screwed.
I was playing a surgeon, and I was worried they were going to say I had to move lights around, or but I didn't. I didn't have to do
No,
anything.
the show must go on, baby. Come on. Hey, Clooney did half his ER episodes with his hand in his pocket.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about, I hear a lot about breaking down the season, that you guys have to break, that you spend time in the room breaking the season. What does that involve?
Well, we come in, it's sort of like setting forth a mission statement of like, what do we want this season to be about? Because we've got, in NCIS's case, we've got 24 episodes to churn out, which is a lot of episodes. And so it helps to kind of have a roadmap of like things we'd like to accomplish this year. Is this the year Mark Harmon gets a girlfriend? Is this the year Wilmer Valderrama, I'll deal with current cast right now. Is this the year Wilmer Valderrama, finds his long lost sister? So we try to, and also in the scope of things, in the past, we've lost some actors, Michael Weatherly and Paulie Perrette, where it's like, they let us know and it's like, okay, we have to, come up with a season-long arc that justifies their exit. So it's really just creating a kind of a roadmap, and we don't beat it out to where in episode 2, this will happen. Episode 3, that'll happen. We try to do it in chunks. We'll do like, 3 or 4 episode arcs, a backstory or a B story, I should say, of stuff that happens to our cast, our characters, things we'd like to see happen. But like all roadmaps, especially the long arching ones, if you're going to break an entire season, that, we're starting here, and by the end of the season, we'd like for Mark Harmon to be in a relationship, and for this person to be moving on, and for this person to find his long lost sister. Let's figure out in teaspoons, while we're solving a crime of the week, how we can dole out in teaspoons these little B stories that really, frankly, are all the kind of that's all the fans, the viewers of the shows even care about. I remember, on every show I've been on, and especially the procedurals, especially the, Third Watch, Crossing Jordan, Castle, Bones, and NCIS, we're like, getting brain cramps trying to figure out some ripping yarn that no one can see coming, and burying that red herring, and all that stuff. And then inevitably, just to like, trick the audience, because it's a very smart audience and they've seen everything. Usually by the first act, they're going, he did it, Right. And you're trying like hell to avoid that. You're trying to fool them and trick them. But inevitably, you run into a fan and none of them remember that stuff. It's like, I love your show. Are those two ever going to hook up? Like it's all the personal shit. That's all they care about, really. So that's the stuff that gets me the most excited anyway. That's the stuff I like to write the most. Our crimes are really like the motor of the episode, but it's the bricks, but all the mortar in between the bricks is where the real story is, So you've got that per episode, and then it's like, well, let's set some goals for ourselves for a 24 episode arc, or for the long story. But I have to say, almost without exception, maybe 1 or 2 times on the myriad shows I've been on, have we set those goals and we've stuck to them. Because inevitably in the middle of it, you discover something. One of your guest actors is really good, and they have an interesting dynamic, and that could lead to this, and let's go in that direction. Or we just change our minds, or the actor doesn't want to do it. Mark doesn't want a girlfriend by the end of the season. He wants to go off on a mission to find whatever. So those are the things. We're very we listen to our actors. We're very collaborative, and they're great. So yeah, we'll break a season, and it's really just to kind of give us what you and I talked about before, about the log line, about, the one pager, where it's like, it's just something to shoot for. It's, it's the North Star to keep you moving toward it. But boy, you're going to take all kinds of, deviations from that route. And you'll be lucky if you get to where you initially headed off to go. So
now this guy, Jack Daniel, who apparently fancies himself a VO artist,
I hear he's quite good.
He is quite good. He was a guest several weeks ago.
Yes, I saw that one. Jack was
one. You saw that. Jack wants to know, to what degree can current events shape or redirect a predetermined season arc?
Well, we've had shows that have featured shootings that if a shooting happens in the news, CBS doesn't air it, and we don't want it aired. Those are those kind of things. So that's one example. We're not a rip from the headline show the way
Law and Order
does it. And I think that's a little safer. But occasionally you'll see something that we do and kind of go, oh, I heard a story years ago from that. And that's, we do our research, and something has to be within the realm of reality to make our show. But yeah, current events, you kind of can't call it. Listen, COVID, this is the big one right now. This is the test, and it might be a later question, but we didn't want to step into, when we started, the writers reported in June. And at that point, so much was unknown by the time we were going to start shooting. We actually don't start shooting until this week, September 9th, that we didn't know how to present the COVID world. What will it look like? And we also knew that our actors were like, well, if we're going to do the COVID world, our agents are wearing masks, because real NCIS agents wear masks. They adhere to they don't want to spread or get it or anything else. And so, of course, our CBS probably certainly doesn't want our actors in masks, because they want to see those handsome, pretty faces. So we decided,
because when they've been talking to me about working on shows, they have no problem with me wearing it. They want me masked.
No mask for you. It's okay.
Even before this.
Well, we have a thing that's been really well set up by CBS and Viacom, and by the people that work with us, our production team. It's incredible. And so they've come up with, like, this quadrant of people. These actors get tested 3 times a week. This group of below the line people get once a week. Writers, you guys work from home, and you can only come in when we're shooting your episode. They don't want to see us ever. It's all just about minimizing. And then for us in writing, it's fewer people in scenes, fewer extras in scenes, unfortunately, for people that love extra work out there, trying to minimize the number of people on set at any one time. So it's going to be one of those things where, like, hair and makeup move in, hair and makeup moves off. Right. Camera crew comes in, they light, they do, So
couldn't you have them wear a green screen mask and then just project facial expressions onto them?
You may be onto something. I hadn't even considered that. No, that's a really
like Melania's dress at the other night at the convention.
Oh my God, that was wasn't it?
You saw some of those, right? What they did? Yeah.
She wears a green dress, and it's
don't wear a green dress. You're just begging for it. Thank you.
Yeah, they went wild with that. That was pretty funny. No, that would be nice. But at any rate, we're gonna basically do like a flashback series of 5 episodes, things that happened between episodes last season, and then hopefully by the time we get 5 under our belt, we'll have a better vision of, like, what this looks like. And you may end up just seeing our team, working within the squad room without masks, but then when they step out, they've got them on, and we'll figure out a way to work it, But
right. You mentioned log lines before, and for my students who are out there listening, I'd love to hear your advice on them. When I first started writing and people would talk to me about log lines, I was always thinking, oh God, it's just a sales tool, and I'm not going to grab some guy in the elevator and sell my idea with one line. Mm-hmm. And now, when I'm working on something, even if I'm working on my novel or not a script, I try to think of the log line.
Yeah.
Because it becomes something that I return to.
Yeah.
To know if I'm on track.
Yeah, I think they're super important. And again, you may not land exactly where you started off, but I think, it's that first plan, that first bud of an idea. It's log line, elevator pitch, whatever it is, that one line. And I used to consider them just about letting the network know what we have in mind, and so they could say yay or nay. So, but we call them one-pagers. So it's much longer than a line. Right. But it's basically synopsizing what I intend to do in this episode in 1 page. And so you try not to put too little, because it just begs more questions. And then if you put too much, it begs even more questions. So you have to find a happy balance. But it really focuses you, and we all hate writing them. Every writer I know hates writing them, because you've got to kind of think, you got to figure out the script before you write the script. But to an extent, not quite the same as outlining, which is where you really have to get into the nuts and bolts of, like, what every character is doing in your script. But on that log line or that 1 page, you want to be able to get them excited about what you're about to write. So you've got your exciting event in the beginning, and then basically this story is about this. You're solving this crime, which will be solved this way, and meanwhile, this character finds out that their sister had a miscarriage or whatever. So the 1 page, that's a bad example, forgive me. That's a very dark example, these two fall in love. Forget the mystery.
There we go. Yeah. Okay.
But what it does for me, as much as we hate writing them, and I think, but it really does focus you up to like, what is this story gonna be about? What is the theme I'm gonna pursue in this? And it really forces you, which is the hard part of writing, frankly. It's the hardest part of writing is sitting your ass in the seat in front of your computer and writing. You know, it's like it's the Hemingway, you know, sit at the typewriter and open a vein. You know, it's like it's that feeling, and especially when, you know, you don't know where you're going next. You know, the best thing is sitting down when I have the roadmap of the outline in front of me and I know where I'm going. And when I'm writing the script, then I'm like, yeah, this makes sense. I know how to make that work. But boy, in that blank one page, you're like, okay, how do I pitch a story I haven't written yet? Like, what's the main mission of this story, and what are we going to get out of it? That's the stuff you throw out there. And like I say, many times you'll go to the finished product of the script and it doesn't even closely resemble the one page or the log line, but that log line was your launching pad. And if you hadn't written it, you'd be out to sea in the process, without having some goal that you're chasing or some thematic something that you're going after. So I think they are super important, and it really helps focus you. Because boy, God knows, you know, artists, writers, directors, actors, you know, we're all kind of dreamy. You know, things are very ethereal, and it takes a while to get to think in concrete terms of like, yeah, I know I want to accomplish, but what's the best way for me to accomplish that? Or what's the best way for me to tell this story in the most interesting way possible? And again, as I think you and I spoke earlier about, you know, someone said to me very early in my screenwriting learning, teaching, going to classes, they just said, you know, the object of screenwriting is to tell the most amount of story in the fewest amount of words.
Right.
So, you know, just really picking each and every word for, you know, what they can bring to the story. And
okay. Well, that brings up something I want your input on. I am constantly working with my students on, and obviously on a show like NCIS, this is probably more difficult on the procedurals, but I am constantly working with my students on telling the story, but not having it come through in the words, not having the words tell the story. Yeah.
That's a good one. And actually, as a matter of fact, that's a David Milch thing said to me again in his, I never forget. Someone that worked for Bochco's company came to me and said, "You're the best new writer we've had here in a long time." And she walked away and he goes, "Your script was fine. All right. Don't get too full of yourself. She doesn't know what she's talking about. Your script was fine." So, but one of the things he said to me in one of my scripts that I'd handed in, he said, "Listen, let me tell you something." He goes, "You're going to be all right as soon as you learn a little economy," he said. And I was like, "Economy?" And he goes, "Yeah, not every thought that gets in a character's head has to pop out their lips. You don't got to have them say every line, every little single thing, and you don't have to spoon feed the audience of what each character is thinking. You got to let the audience play." I'm doing a little bit of Milch here, so whatever.
Right.
If you ever get Titus Welliver on this show, he will give you the best David Milch, better than David Milch does.
Well, Titus does great impressions. Have you heard his Pacino Through the Ages?
Yes. You can. I think you can YouTube that or so. I think it's around.
It's spectacular. He does every you know, the Godfather, the Mean Street, you know, not Mean Streets.
I can't come close to it. Yeah, no. And then so his obscure ones are the ones that only people that know David Milch go, "Oh my God, that's Milch so perfectly." I don't know how. It's such a gift to be able to capture somebody, you know, with a couple of words. But Titus is, as you know, an amazing guy and a great actor and a genius at mimicry. But anyway, that was my weak attempt at saying, you know, you need to learn a little economy. You got to quit having the actors, the characters say everything that's in their brain. Like, well,
it's not the character's job to tell the story.
Right. Let the viewer play. Let the audience sit at home and read into a line. And I'll hear from all the best actors I work with. And actually, John Wells had said this to me. He said, you know, don't be afraid to put a line. He had sort of a reverse take on it where he says, don't be afraid to put a line in there to at least let the actor know what they're playing. You know, and then you can take the line away. If they don't want to say it on set, you can. And I've had lots of actors going, you know, "Can I give you this with a look?" And depending on the actor, most of the good ones who say it, I'm like, absolutely. Because I know they can take whatever hacky line I've written for them and deliver it with a look. And that way the audience can sit at home and kind of go, oh, he loves her. He's just not saying it. Whatever that is. You know what I mean? Which is much more interesting. And you're always far more engaged in a story where you have to, where you have to look around the bend to get the story. It's just not being thrown in your face all the time.
Well, I might get in trouble for this.
Looking around,
Yeah. I might get in trouble for this, but you know what? As an actor, you know what we're really saying when we say, "Can I give you this with a look?"
This line sucks.
No, we're saying it's one less line I don't have to learn.
There's that too.
Like, just cut all of it. Let me just stand here. If you look, I'm very happy to do that.
It's funny that sometimes, and they'll make it in trouble with the network for saying this. When I was on Crossing Jordan, you get notes from the network, and they want clarity. So the audience get this, and I'm like, please, the audience is smarter than you give them credit for. Let them play. But I really think someone should say this. And so often, the late great Miguel Ferrer would turn to me and just say, like, oh, Scotty, do I have to say this with that incredible voice of his? Do I have to say all this? Yeah. And I'd be like, it was a network note. Do what you want. Because I just would be like, well, because if the network yells at me, I go, Miguel wouldn't say it. He's Miguel Ferrer.
Well, Mamet calls them the Penguins.
Oh, what is that?
There's a
network.
Mamet's letter to the writers of the unit. Have you ever read that?
No, I haven't. I have to find it.
Oh, you can find it on the internet. He wrote a letter to the writers of the unit, and he talks about the Penguins.
Okay.
And what they want.
I have to say, we have excellent. If any of them are watching, we have excellent Penguins on NCIS. We actually get great help from our network people, and they're not as. I've worked on some shows where the network's super intrusive, and our group, the group that we work for over the years, the line I'd heard when I came in, it was like, we don't get killed with network notes because they really don't understand what makes NCIS work, so they just kind of go, just don't break it, do what you want to do,
right?
But they do come in and when even no matter how much we resent a note, sometimes it never fails to make the show just a little bit better. So we're always grateful to them. But the Penguins are out there. I just thought of another. God, what was his name? I'll think of it. But I thought of another story. But anyway,
Chris Zaver asking for some writing advice. Why? That she may know where a script is going when she watches it, but not yours. But she can't seem to sit down and start a script. She comes out with the idea, but can't flesh it out. So you've got the great idea. How do you find the discipline or the technique to turn that into?
Right. Well, yeah. When you finish a script, first of all, which again it can be a super torturous process. Or when you go to see a movie you love and, or a play, for example, Hamilton, I remember I kept leaning over to my daughter going, I can't believe someone wrote this. Like, what? The brain power that went into turning that massive story into this amazing musical. Anyway, but anytime you go and see a movie or a TV show or you write something that you've completed, you look back at it and you kind of go like, well, yeah, every word is kind of where it should be. Like, of course, what else would it be? I know it's kind of hard to describe, but it just seems to make sense from a place. But then that's where the blank page comes in and confounds you because suddenly you have to make all that stuff up. There's, scripts aren't written, they're rewritten. You always hear, you kind of like do the vomit draft the first time around. You throw everything but the kitchen sink in there and you don't worry about it. And again, I think another Hemingwayism, or one of the greats said, the first draft of anything is shit,
right.
Which I never think. When I'm writing my first draft, I'm like, I got to make this good. I'm not worried about that. I try to get it right on the first draft, but inevitably the second draft always ends up improving it. It's really, and how do you find the discipline? Have a plan. Really, again, what we were talking about before, when you just try to sit down and go, okay, I should, or give yourself a goal, something reachable, 2 pages a day. And it might be something you throw out the previous day's 2 pages because you hate them the next day. But if you just sort of set small goals for yourself And don't beat yourself up if you're not actively typing. You know, the Jack Nicholson Shining thing of like, when you hear this typing, I'm writing. When you don't hear typing, I'm still writing. You know, that's true. There was an old cartoon comic strip called Shoo about these birds, and there was an Uncle Cosmo who worked for the newspaper, and Skylar, the little nephew, came in, and Uncle Cosmo, his typewriter was sitting over here, and he's looking out the window, and Cosmo came in and said, Skylar came in and said, Uncle Cosmo, I thought you were a writer. I don't hear any typing. And Uncle Cosmo said, typists type, writers look out windows. So that gave me the permission in that silly old comic strip to feel okay about not constantly typing the first fucking thing that popped into my head, that I'm allowed to like lean back, stare out the window, and go, how does the scene gonna go? What's the best way I can take with this story? How can I, So I'll try to, like, you know, the way Ali pictured the fight, you know, he fought the fight before he fought the fight. He thought through the whole fight. You know, when you're thinking through a scene, what might be the best way to start this? What might be the best way for these two characters to talk about this? You know, you have the conversation in your head. I do think, you know, most people in general, but certainly writers and probably actors too, you know, we talk to ourselves constantly. We're constantly having conversations with our dashboard as we drive anywhere, or, you know, on our walks. It's never just quiet. You're constantly having some sort of dialogue within yourself. So, you know, use all that stuff, and don't beat yourself up with the pressure of having to sit down and write the scene. You never, you know, it's bird by bird. What was that? That was another great Anne Lamott book.
Anne Lamott, yeah,
beautiful. And just the title in itself is of just, you know, her daughter having to categorize all the birds in the, you know, for her ornithology class or whatever. And Mom, how am I ever going to get through all these birds? And she just said, bird by bird.
No, it's her.
Huh?
No, it was her dad. It was her. She said, and her dad was her father. Yeah.
Brilliant. That's right. It was that. So you know, for writers, like one page at a time, man. It's just like just one scene at a time, and don't worry about writing a whole damn movie, because that, you know, you'll look at retrospect and go, hey, I wrote a whole movie, but just do one scene at a time.
When I'm really trying to get in the groove, what I tell myself is that my job is not to write. My job is to sit in front of the computer with that file open for an hour and a half.
That's good. That's really
what I have to do, because I'm incapable of sitting there for an hour and a half and not writing something.
Absolutely. That's a great, I never heard that before. That's genius. That really is.
And then there are days where maybe I get a sentence written, and days maybe where I get 3 or 4 pages written, but it averages out.
Yep.
And over time, you have something to then go back and wash the garbage.
Yeah.
Which is another phrase that I love.
Yeah, for sure. That's genius, though. Of like, just again, it's someone said to me, Sitzfleisch. It's some German term meaning like basically sit your flesh in the sit your flesh down in front of the typewriter or the keyboard and just do it.
Yeah.
And you know, if it's an hour and a half, if I'm on a deadline, it's 12 hours. You know, I'll put as much time into it as I can. And I will say 2 deadlines help to get something finished. Even just create a false deadline to yourself. Call your best friend and say, hey, ask me for the draft of my book 6 months from now. Okay.
Right.
And I want you, and ask me and bug me about it. How's the book coming? Let me know, you know.
So I'm 20 years old and I want to be doing what you're doing eventually.
Right.
What do I do?
Well, as you know, there's no roadmap. There's no one way to go about this. You know, that my circuitous path with Sean Penn and all that stuff is mine. And honestly, I think it is a little bit of what I'd said before of, if I were to get into this now, I'd say go live a life and write on the side, go find something productive to do in the world, helping others possibly, or just if you need to pay rent, do any job that helps you pay rent, but put aside that hour and a half every day, every night, force yourself as best you can to, and you know, again, if work doesn't allow, make it a few hours a week, where just force yourself to write those pages, and put yourself up out there. You know, the hardest thing is, you know, writers have a tough time where, you know, you're putting your ass on the chopping block every time you're putting a script out for people to like go, what the hell is that? You know, or go, hey, this is pretty good. So it's a pretty brave act in and of itself. So I know lots of people, playwrights, for example, that like, you know, finish a script and then put it in a drawer because I don't want to put it out there because maybe it'll get stolen or maybe someone will steal my idea, you know, or steal my idea, or they'll you know, or some other bad thing will happen to it. And I'm just like, you got to put your shit out there. So if I'm 20 years old, I'm writing and I'm handing it out to friends, and I'm having readings and hearing what works for people and hearing my words out loud. And when I'm writing, I'm saying my words out loud. I'm saying my dialogue to hear how it rolls off the tongue. And if you can get a job in the industry, great. But, you know, I know lots of assistants that have worked their way up to being television writers. But I also know a few bartenders like myself that wrote a few good things and got lucky and got in the door. So I wouldn't say like you have to go and be a writer's assistant, though that's a way to go. But I think nothing replaces life experience. You know, there's certain writers and directors out there, auteurs and stuff that are really good, but you can kind of tell they're influenced by other stuff. You're watching some things and kind of going, oh, this person watched a lot of Scorsese when they were a kid, and they came up with, this person's obviously influenced by Spielberg or somebody, which is fine, and they're doing great stuff. But I do think there's huge value in you know, creating your own voice, which again is when I'm reading specs and stuff. I really like to, you know, hey, here's my bone spec and here's a play I wrote. I'm like, show me the play. Like, I'm just interested in to see how those characters talk, and then if I'm intrigued by that, I'll have a look at how they write television too. So.
Right. Do you have any desire to write for the stage again? Do you have any pet projects that you work on in your own time?
I have a few plays in my drawer that, not really. I have two that I wrote earlier when I had more time on my hands. And I got to be honest with you, I find the prospect a little scary. And that may sound crazy in that I'm able to write a TV show that, you know, 60 million people watch eventually with NCIS. But the idea of like writing a play and then, you know, asking 100 people to fill a theater and watch it and stuff, it kind of scares me a little bit now. I don't know why. I don't know if it's because expectations are greater. It's easy to sneak up on people. You know, when I was a starting off writer, I was like, no one knew me. Whatever I wrote, it's like I could sneak up. But as soon as people kind of go, oh, I bet this is going to be great that you wrote this thing, and then, you know, I'll get there eventually. I just haven't had the time with I've been super lucky with television, and it does take an awful lot of your time. So,
well, and you have some other things that you do that feed you. You have two organizations that you're very active in.
Yeah. I would say that's the other important tip. If you're 20 years old, again, I would say, you know, a great piece of advice that was said to me is like, you know, as soon as you start to feel, you know, bad about your shitty little career, pull your head out of your own ass and go and do something for someone else. It was great advice given to me early on. I didn't exactly know how to go about it other than to like donate to charities or go do walks and stuff like that. But as I mentioned earlier, when Catherine, my wife, and I had Shane, we were faced with the prospect of raising a child in a wheelchair. Shane only lived 2 weeks, and we were obviously devastated. And it was the worst time of our lives. I met David Milch a month after that, and he was nice enough to put me on the staff of Brooklyn South. And I have to say, when I worked at Fox for that entire year, like, I was glad my car knew the way, because I was like a zombie. You know, I was like, I'd smile through work. Hey, hi, David. Hey, you know, I'd do my best to get through the day. But as soon as I shut the door, it was like I was cranking, you know, Neil Young's Powderfinger live, you know, and just like sobbing over the hill as I go back over to the valley,
right,
in both directions, while my wife was grieving on the couch. But about a year later, my wife had suffered a couple miscarriages after we lost Shane, and we just decided we'd learned about this playground where kids with disabilities could play in Connecticut. And as soon as my sister had sent me the article, because Shane had this thing called spinal muscular atrophy. And so the article was about a boy named Jonathan who had SMA, spinal muscular atrophy. And my sister was like, wow, look at this. Like, we'd never heard of this disease. And all of a sudden it was super rare, but we'd never heard of this. And here's an article about it. Well, my wife saw the article and was like, I want to do this. We got to build a playground where Shane would have played with his friends had he lived. Because at the time, the Americans with Disabilities Act had, they did wonderful things. Those ramps at the curbsides and wide bathroom stalls and stuff for people with disabilities. But in the area of playgrounds, a wheelchair accessible playground meant was a cement ramp leading to a sand moat with play equipment inside that a kid couldn't get to, or wood chip or whatever. So kids could like go to the playground and watch other kids play, which wasn't fun. So this was an idea that we could actually build a place where kids could play with able-bodied kids, and the socialization would kind of remove the stigma a little bit. I grew up, I don't know about you, but in the 60s, 70s, my parents were great people. They donated to Jerry's Kids when they could, but like if you saw a kid in a wheelchair, you kind of turned the other way because it was just too awkward and painful. It was just.
Should we run this? Should we run this video? And
This is just an example of the kind of playgrounds we built. We set out to build. So Inclusion Matters is what we are known as now. Inclusion Matters by Shane's inspiration. We decided to put our mission ahead of the title. We've been known as Shane's Inspiration for 20 odd years, and Shane would be 24, I think now, had he lived. But we started out building one playground in Griffith Park, which we thought we were done after one. And then someone came to us from West LA and said, our son Aiden loves your playground, but we live way in SLA. Is there a way we can get one in our neighborhood? So we decided to build a second. And we had tapped all of our friends for donation money, but luckily these people had friends of their own. So we managed to, what took us 2 years to build, we were able to do in 1 year with Aiden's place in West LA. And it kind of took on a life of its own, frankly. We're now up to 73 playgrounds worldwide. There's a bunch around the world, and there's like 34 in the Los Angeles area that we've been able to team with, LA Rec and Parks. And, we always say that it's an idea that's time had come. I think once people kind of saw it, early on, we had people saying like city council, we had to pitch them to go and do it. And they were like, well, I never see kids with wheelchairs at the playground. Is this really necessary? It's like, well, the reason you don't see them is because it's a really miserable experience. So
you can't get there.
Can't get there. So once we built them, and then the idea got out there, they've kind of taken off. And so yeah, it's been great. Inclusion Matters. That Shane's inspiration is it definitely is something that saved my wife and I our lives. Basically, it gave us a mission, and we since then went on to have a healthy daughter, Grace, who's now 21. And so that mission sort of found us, obviously, and it saved us. But I have to say, it definitely has sourced me in terms of, when I get bummed out about my shitty little career or when I hit roadblocks and stuff, it was always great to be able to kind of go and do something completely outside of my job and outside of that world. And it really kind of feeds the soul. And so whatever you kind of choose to do. The other one you had mentioned, thank you for mentioning, is WeSpark. I'm on the board at WeSpark. It's a charity that provides free services for cancer patients and their families. And it was founded by Wendy Jo Sperber, who's an amazing woman. Her parents were big Shane's Inspiration supporters at the time. And Wendy Jo founded this charity after she got breast cancer, and after she passed, our friend Nancy Allen runs the place. And it feels good because obviously cancer, you don't know anyone who hasn't been touched by cancer in their lives, whether it's themselves personally or a loved one. So, and I've lost a father, a sister, and my best friend to cancer. And it was, so when they asked me to be on the board, I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I see the for it. So, because I know that everybody kind of they certainly needed the services of a place like WeSpark. So that's WeSpark.org. And
I want to let everybody know that the links for both WeSpark and for Inclusion Matters are down below in the description of this video, so that you can find their addresses there if you're interested in getting more information or in making a donation.
Thank you so much for that.
Oh, of course. Thank you. I never let anybody off the show without, well, there's a couple of other questions I can ask if you're not in a hurry.
It's very busy, right? I have nothing but time in my hands. So yeah.
One of my favorite topics is subtext. I find it endlessly fascinating. And whether I'm talking to a production designer or a sound designer or a writer, because it's everybody's job on the set.
Yeah.
Getting back to that idea of getting away from not relying on the words to tell the story, letting everything else tell the story.
Yep.
So is that something that you consciously think about as you're putting a script together, or do you sometimes write a scene and later go back to it and say, oh my God, my subconscious put that in there?
Yeah, for sure. I've had the greatest joy sometimes is you'll write something, for all the years that I auditioned as an actor and suffered through that process, because it can be pretty tough. I don't know a lot of actors that love auditioning, but writing a scene and then hearing it out loud from 10 different actors. Sometimes an actor will put something and spin on something that I didn't see and kind of go, oh, okay. And then they were, someone will say, did you mean for that to mean that? I'm like, yeah, it worked great, didn't it?
Absolutely. I'm a genius.
100%. What's tricky is I'll write a scene. So I'll do my slug line and then I'll do some prose. And I'll say, these two characters are discussing baked goods, but it's after the night. They spent the night together last night, but they're in front of people and can't really discuss it.
Right.
And I'll write the thing and they're talking about baked goods. Well, a lot of actors, as you know, too, I don't appreciate this, but they come in and they don't even read stage directions. Just show me the words I got to say. I can bring the rest to life. It's just like, no, they're there really specifically for a reason. Like that. The people have always said, write as little description as you possibly can. David Milch, oddly enough, would write blocks of like everything that character's thinking, because he's not going to have you say what they're thinking in the scene, but this is what they're thinking and here's what they're saying. And nobody dares cross off David Milch's prose,
Right.
Little old me, who the hell am I? So they might just get the scene and kind of go, yeah, like, why are we talking about baked goods? I'm like, okay, if you look up here, it says that you slept together last night. See, if you read this, it's right there in front of you. Just say the words.
Yeah.
So that's the stuff. And boy, when it's done well, there's nothing better. When you're at a movie and you're seeing, there's nothing worse. I hate to say it's like, and I'm not alone in this, but like, boy, if you can find some other way to say I love you than I love you, boy, just give me that every time. To me, it's like the two biggest cheats in cinema or any play or anything is like, I love you and fuck you. It's like, look, can we just figure out an easier way to say?
I always just say these scones are delicious.
There you go. Yeah, and if you say it like that, I am weeping at home. I'm just saying, he's so good. He loves her.
You're funny. I love you and fuck you. The other thing that's making me nuts is it seems like a rule came down several years ago that said the way to show that a character is experiencing overwhelming emotion, the only way to show that a character is experiencing overwhelming emotion is to have them vomit.
What?
There is, in every movie, it's like, I'm really upset now. I'm going to throw up.
Yeah. They're at a loss for what words can I have them say now? I know this is so overwhelming. They're just going to turn into a wastebasket and go, off screen, or maybe we'll show it to you too.
Right. It makes me crazy.
Yeah. You see more of that. And even if that's true, even if most of us, if something really tragic happened, that might be our impulse. It's like, think of something else.
I have had tragic stuff happen in my life. I have thrown up when I had a stomach virus.
Yeah.
And that's the end of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
Come up with, be a little more creative. And I say the same thing to my students who are writing. It's like, find a better way.
Yeah.
Do some work.
I couldn't agree more. And I think, from Harrison Ford's, improv, I love you, said, what's her name? When he was Han Solo in Star Wars.
Right.
Princess Leia says, I love you. And he just turns and says, I know.
Yeah.
The script is written was, I love you too. And he just said, I know, which gave you everything you needed. It was his character. It was the moment. You knew he loved her, but it was like, so you always try to think of that kind of stuff to write into a script. I had an interesting conversation with, I'm going to name drop now. I actually did have a script produced. Unfortunately, it went straight to video. They ran out of money for prints and ads and stuff, but I was brought in to rewrite a feature with Andy Garcia, who's a great guy, amazing guy. But it was a smaller budget, like little small thriller with he and Linda Cardellini and Vincent Kartheiser, all great people. But in talking, it was, and in the script, I got to sit down with Andy for a while and talk about grief, because his character lost a child to suicide, and I was able to speak from my position of having lost Shane. So, and we were discussing that the boy commits suicide in the film, and then cut to 2 years later, and he's now on the lecture circuit. He's a psychiatrist, and he's written a book about his experience, but now he gets out and talks to people. And I was trying to describe to him, saying that to me, far more tragic than someone with a cloud over their head after having experienced something like that is someone who paints on a smile. You know what I mean? Just like someone that you know is going through the worst thing ever. When we lost Shane, literally after the funeral, we were at a friend's house for sort of a reception afterwards. And, you know, you've got that onslaught of long-faced friends coming to you and wanting to help you. And your impulse is just to make them feel better, or to like crack a joke or something, that to just take the moment off. It's to let your own steam out, or to let your, and I remember even just the reactions. I was surprised by the reactions I got for that. Was I was trying to make everybody feel at ease, and it only served to, I think, make them a little sadder. So in discussing this with Andy, I actually had written in a thing where the son commits suicide. It's this awful scene, and then cut to 2 years later, and now he's backstage. He's grown this giant beard, and the professor is out on the stage about to introduce him to come and speak to these students. And I just scripted in there, because this is what he had asked me. He goes, what's the deal with that? I goes, I want to be sure I have that moment right. And I had him pour himself a glass of water and just have him shake, basically, just like he shakes and he drinks. He has this moment, and then he hears his name, and then he walks out and he smiles and he waves and says, thank you, thank you. And then he goes on, and he's great. I said, I feel like those moments, it's sort of, it's akin to, you know, my own father, you know, watching my father take a hit off a Kent cigarette, you know, that he learned to smoke while he was in the service, those English cigarettes, you know, watching him, you know, hey, how was school? Okay, great. And then just seeing a moment of like, because he'd had a hard day at work, you know, he had a tough day, but he wasn't letting me on. He was like, you know, how was school today? How was football practice? Right. Oh, great. But those moments really, if I can infuse those moments into a story, I'll do it with every script I write if I can, and I'll talk to the actor specifically about, you know, you're putting on a nice face for this, but this is what you're feeling inside. So in terms of subtext, I feel like that's the money of those moments. And then Andy played the hell out of it. Of course, he did exactly that, you know, and you know, he didn't need my coaching to get there. He got it, you know, as soon as we said it. So
right. There's to my mind, I talk to my students all the time about two types of subtext, which are I think of it in two categories. There's character subtext, which you've been talking about, and then I think about this thing that I don't know if there's some other name for it, but I call it authorial subtext. So for instance, in a scene like did you ever see the movie Crazy Stupid Love?
You know, I did not. No, sorry.
Okay, Sideways.
Wait, is Crazy Stupid Love with
Steve Carell, Ryan Gosling?
Oh, great! Yes, okay. Love that. I don't know what I'm mistaking it for, but yeah, great movie.
The scene in the backyard when he comes over late at night, and he's in the backyard sweeping up leaves. Mm-hmm. At night, she doesn't know he's there, mm-hmm. And he stops and he starts watching her through the window, and she makes a phone call, and his cell phone rings.
Oh, God,
she's standing in the house, mm-hmm. And he picks up the phone. He says, "Hey, what's up?" And she says, "Hi, I need your help with something. The pilot light went out on the water heater, and I'm in the basement." Now, she, as a character, is just making shit up to talk to him.
Hear his voice.
Right. But the subtext of what they talk about, and she's not aware of this, and this is why I mean it's the author layering in meaning. She says, I'm in the basement. The pilot light is out. How do I get it lit again? Mm. And he talks her through it. He says, there's a gray door. You have to open the gray door. there's a knob that you turn and a red button that says push, and it's this metaphor for marriage and keeping the passion alive. The characters, it's not character subtext.
Yeah.
They're not talking about their marriage, but the author is.
Yeah. Those moments, boy, when you can mine that stuff, I feel a lot less talented right now because I can't count how many times I've done that at all. I mean, when you're lucky when you think of those moments, but when you see them and you're like, oh, I gotta figure out a way to do that, and it's like you said, created. It's not just subtext of the lines are saying something else,
right?
And especially, the beauty of it is, the two of them looking at each other and being able to come up with lines and a discussion between them. That's that kind of a metaphor, that direct a metaphor of their own light's gone out and how can we get it back? Boy, I always say to writers, just like, I don't, what's the word? I don't dance about architecture much. I don't talk much about my own process and how I come up with certain things. But boy, if you just keep writing, sooner or later you land on something halfway profound. And to me, that's one of those things where if I just keep writing, I'm sure I probably landed on something akin to that. Nothing maybe handled quite as well, but boy, that's magic, man. If you're able to invent a moment like that, that's actually not reliant upon performance as much as you've set up a device in the story, illustrate to the audience this incredible analogy, a metaphor, whatever you want to call it. It's those are magic moments. So, and that's when your game is on, man. If you're able to create things like that, and again, we shoot for that. We all shoot for those moments, and just in terms of cinema, we all shoot for the Silence of the Lambs moment where Jodie Foster's knocking on one door and the other guy's hitting the buzzer, and they're at the wrong doors. It's like the audience doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
you can do those mechanics. You can pull them off. You have to be pretty canny about them, but boy, to be able to create a scenario like that on the fly is pretty bitchin'. I gotta say, that's I could die a happy writer writing a scene like that.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty crazy.
It is
crazy stuff. Do you talked about you talked several times about that they're they're in love, but they're really talking. They had sex last night, but they're really talking about baked goods. But are there other themes that interest you besides baked goods that you find yourself returning to?
No,
it's really baked goods, is it? No, but seriously,
those Shoyadel you get down at Venero's on.
Oh
11. Yeah, it's that level of baked good that I aspire to.
No, because I know there are certain things. There's certain themes that I always return to. Almost always return to.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if there are things that for you that consciously or not, that you suddenly realize, oh my God, I'm writing about that thing again.
Yeah. I mean, sure. We're, more often than not, I'm surprised I'm landing on like, a father issue or a mother issue or, I don't know if that's specific enough for you, but
yeah, no, it is.
I really dig buried treasure stories, and I think there's some metaphor in there to mining the truth out of people, or this, if I just think on several different shows, Castle, I did a fun one with whiskey that was buried under a bar and that had belonged to the old mayor of New York, and it's just like Prohibition era whiskey. And
was that the one where they go back in time?
No, it kind of felt like it, but no, they went to a writer's. They go to this writer's bar that Castle used to hang out in, and then
right, okay, I remember that one.
He found a sliver of glass was found in his head, and they figure it was this red glass, and they're looking for it. But then they ultimately found this vault down below that was Jimmy Walker's vault, and again, completely made up. But Jimmy Walker had all these speakeasies all over town, so it was just great to get to put my own bartending knowledge in it and do that. But discovering a different kind of buried treasure where they actually go in and they find these wall-to-wall Scotch whiskeys lying in the wall that drove Castle crazy. But from that, I also had a theme going on where Castle, digs some personal treasure out of I'm forgetting the character's name now, but Stana Kadic's name. I haven't been there in 10 years, but so that for me is fun, and I just think audiences respond really well with Buried Treasure. They just kind of like want to see it get found. Another writer of ours is writing one for this season, not mine, but he's doing a great job with it. But because then, as you're mining for that stuff, you're able to mine certain things from other characters. But in terms of themes, give me some examples of what you keep going back to, and maybe it'll help me figure out what I keep going back to.
I go back to repeatedly the theme of justice being something that ultimately the individual is responsible for, not society or the jury. And it's something in American pop, we have this conflict, and this is what my thesis was on in college, was that in our politics, it's democracy, the majority. In our justice system, it's the jury. In our popular culture, it's the lone hero who knows what justice is and has to administer it.
Yeah, that's good.
And and what my thesis was about was that even in To Kill a Mockingbird, where Atticus is a lawyer, at the end, the only way to get justice, the sheriff, when he says that Boo Radley will have to stand trial, and the sheriff, Heck Tate, says, no, Bob Ewell fell on his own knife.
Right.
And Atticus has to accept that the law doesn't work, and that the only way to get justice is to allow the law to be broken. Yeah. And that's what I return to frequently in my writing.
Yeah, that's pretty great. Yeah, that's I get it. I have to think harder on that one of what I go back to a lot. Maybe someone who even outside myself watches going, what are you talking about? You constantly write about this. All your stories are the same thing over and over again.
Well, it's funny because I had a conversation with my dad once where he had an interview. He came home from an interview, and I said, how was the interview? And he said, it was stupid. The guy kept talking to me about the kind of role I play. And there isn't a kind of role I play. And I looked at him and I said, yes, there is. There is a type that you play frequently.
That's
and he
hilarious.
said, what's that? And I said, you play more often than not, what you play is the guy who everybody thinks is crazy because he's the only sane person in a crazy world.
Absolutely.
The Russians are coming, catch-22, the in-laws, time and time again.
In-laws, yeah, for sure.
He's that guy.
That's true. But he's not aware of it.
Okay, well, whatever,
He's just doing what he does. He's not aware of that. Yeah. Right. He has, I'm sure, very individual thoughts of all those characters he played and what drove them. Right. But we're able to sit there and kind of go, oh, no, you're that guy. You're perfect for that. Yeah. Yeah. That's funny. I haven't examined my work in any kind of depth to even know like what I'm always constantly drawn to. But I'll have to think about that. That's a good question. I'm not.
But what's interesting is that if we gave all of your work to a scholar, they would probably say, "Oh, look, he's returning again to this theme.
This is the hole in his soul he keeps trying to fill with story."
Yeah. Well, I think that's kind of true. That's part of what I think if what we're doing is really art, it's not necessarily filling a hole in our soul, but I think good art wrestles.
Totally. Yeah, that's very good. Yeah. We're constantly wrestling and we're trying to answer this either multiple questions or the same question over and over again.
Because if you're not wrestling, then you're lecturing, and lecturing is not a good thing to do to your audience.
This might sound very, a little We Are the World, but I definitely am drawn to, stories that sort of illustrate how much we are more alike than we're different. I definitely, writing Third Watch was one where, you're writing about people, you're writing about cops and firemen and stuff, and people that are a certain income bracket and really working hard, and and have opinions about other poorer people, richer people. And yeah, you might write the rich asshole who's looking down on the poor guy or whatever. But I love those stories. I do like to, when I can, illustrate, that the great thing about 9/11 was when everybody, no matter what your walk of life was, sort of just kind of, for a moment at least, until they were all told to go shopping at the mall, we're like, fuck, America's against the wall. What can we do? Everyone kind of stood as one for a moment,
Kind of like now.
Exactly like now.
Exactly like now.
COVID, no problem. Everybody's together.
Everybody's together. Everybody's masking up.
Not a problem. Yeah, making sacrifices for my fellow man. You got it.
But you're right about this, and it that is, I think, it's another thing I talk about in my classes. I think the highest calling of what we do is to show somebody in the audience the other existing in them.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's dead on. The other's a big one for me, and I got major problems with that. I definitely am, I always find there's two types where it's like, there's the person that, like, man, things aren't going right for me. What am I doing wrong? Let me look within and figure out what I need to be doing different for things to go right for me. And then there's another kind of person that goes, man, things aren't going right for me, and it's that fucking guy's fault.
Right.
That brown guy, he's got my job, or he did that, and if it wasn't for them, and that's fed by certain media outlets. And then, but occasionally I'm able to write some things, and when I can, that aren't black hats and white hats in terms of good guys and bad guys or whatever, where they're put in a situation where it's like, yeah, you guys have a lot more in common if you would just fucking get over yourselves, or, listen to your own heartbeats. You'd notice that, we're all sort of in this together. And yeah, it's a little depressing of how this thing has been playing out, but that just makes you go, all right, I just got to keep writing shit that says the opposite,
Right.
I love writing stuff for our audience. And our audience is more diverse than people think, but we're definitely we're a military show, so we get a lot. We are big in the red states. But there's more open minds there than I think we get credit for. I think there's, this might be an old, fallacy or whatever, but I think there's like 10% of extremely left, there's 10% of extremely right, but the good 80% is kind of in the middle. Yeah,
I think you're right.
That's kind of what gets overlooked. So I like to live in that middle quite a bit if I can, and try to, yes, we introduce, we have a guest star agent that we introduce as gay. We get just as many tweets saying, oh, that's wonderful, good for them, and oh, I like that character so much, I hope they come back. And yeah, we get some tweets that say, way to go all Hollywood on us, NCIS, that kind of bullshit. But I think eventually, again, if we can just keep demonstrating of like, these are people too, and you're a person, and if you just, there's people that hate gay people or hate black people, and they've never met a gay or black person,
right,
or whatever they live or whatever.
Well, that is a great note that I want to let you go on, but with just one more question, and probably the most important question I'll ask. I'm
going to blow it.
Am I going to get out of jail? Will my character ever get out of jail, or am I just gone?
I'm going to lobby. Lobby that we have a breakout. Matthew did a wonderful job on NCIS. Was it 4 years ago? 5 years ago?
I think it was 90. I mean, 2014. I think it was.
That long ago. Okay, yeah.
And it was funny because Mark said to me, we should have you back. And I said to him, I'm pretty sure I'm going to jail.
Were you a lawyer or a doctor? I forget. You were
I was a doctor. I was what I so often am, which is the schmuck who's not the bad guy, but he does something bad because he's trying not to whatever. I was the doctor who harvested a kidney from a dead vat to save my mentor. But then the head of the veterans hospital knew that I did it and made me keep doing it. And he sold. I didn't sell it on the black market. He did.
There you go.
So I did a bad thing for a good reason, but then kept doing it.
At the very least, I would say if it's 6 seasons ago, you're surely at least eligible for parole by now. So,
I should be out by now.
Yeah. Unless you're dead on our show, we have brought back characters as the same character multiple times. Your phone might ring 5 years after the fact and go like, "Yeah, that one scene you did, we need you for 2 more scenes." Like, what? I
don't think that character has a life.
Okay, well, let's see. Otherwise, again, if you appear in a scene and someone goes, "Do I know you?" Yeah, I got paroled a couple months ago, but
he also has a lot less hair than he did.
Oh, there you go. You could so you're saying in 6 years you look markedly different? Is that what you're saying?
Well, prison has not been kind to
me. Oh dear! Oh, that's a note to go out on. That's right there.
Listen, this is great. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much. And anyone who's watching, I hope I haven't bored you too much. But honestly,
you're a wealth of great information and great stories. And for those of you watching, thanks for watching. And please remember to subscribe and click the bell icon so that you get notified of upcoming live streams, such as the other show that I do with my brother Anthony, Two Brothers Talk About Movies. And this Wednesday at 10 Eastern, 7 Pacific, we're going to be talking about the movie The Paper, directed by your friend Ron Howard, with Michael Keaton and Glenn Close and Robert Duvall and Marissa Tomei. And we are also going to have a very special surprise guest on the show. So tune in 7 Pacific, 10 Eastern on Wednesday. And Scott, this has been great. Thank you.
Really writing it down. I can't wait to see that. I want to see the surprise guest, and I love that movie, The Paper. So,
and I'm going to make you come down and not come down, but virtually come down to Chapman and talk to my students there.
Oh, very cool. Excellent.
Well, all right,
buddy. It was great to be with you, and give my regards to New York, and stay well.
Will do. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, buddy. Bye.